Want to know which joint tape you should use for your drywall project? Mesh tape, paper tape, other tape? We're going to tell you all about that coming up next. Okay, welcome back to our video today. I'm Guy with that Kilted Guy Videos, and today we're just going to do a brief video about joint tape. If you're doing a drywall project and you're trying to do any finishing yourself or repair, etc., you probably come across a few different kinds and wonder which one's the best and what's the difference. So we're going to talk about mesh tape. We're going to talk about paper joint tape. And we got these two are the most common. We'll start with the two most common. Now, in new construction, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've seen, I haven't done a lot of new construction in the past 10 years. I specialized on small jobs and that. But for the first 10 years or so of my career, we did nothing but new hanging, taping, and finishing. And all we ever used was good old paper joint tape. And the reason for that is a number of reasons. One is cost. This is a lot cheaper than the mesh tape. It runs through tools. We used to use a set of about $5,000 or $6,000 tools. We used one called a bazooka. That was a common name for it. It was an automatic joint taper, and it ran the paper tape only. I don't even think you could ever run mesh tape through it. You wouldn't want to. On new construction, you're doing lots and lots of taping in one day. To tape a whole house can take a couple of guys the whole day to tape the angles and the flats and the butt joints and the repairs and so on. And so it's cost efficient to go ahead and do it this way. You can apply this with a couple different methods. You can apply this by hand, which I'll show you here. This is commonly called a banjo, and this is kind of a semi-automatic joint taper. I think these run about $70. I've had this one since before time began, I think. I'm actually just 55, not afraid to admit it. Basically, this one works by, you put your joint tape, paper tape here, it feeds through here. I'll show it up here in the close-up view. The mud goes in this section, the paper goes through here and comes out, and it puts the mud on by pulling it through the mud, and then you cut it with this little blade right here. Now, I can tell you, it's a lot faster than doing it by hand, but especially if you're new to this, it's kind of a pain to run one of these. This part right here can be hard to get the tape to come out when there's all this mud in here. It's slick, it's wet, covered in mud. It's really messy. You can run it by putting your hand through here or holding this handle. And just getting it to cut the tape can be even tricky. But if you're going to do very much taping, more than say a room, I would definitely recommend looking into getting this. But we're just going to talk about hand application methods, and I'm not really going to get into taping today. I'll do a separate video on that, so be sure and subscribe. Like if you see that little subscribe button, yeah, there it is right there. We're going to put that at the end of the video, and if you got a smartphone, you can click on it. If not, look down there at the bottom. There's a subscribe button. Be sure and subscribe, and you'll get notified of all of our upcoming videos. Now, what I think I will do is go on to the mesh tape. Mesh tape is quite a bit more expensive per roll. And are there advantages or disadvantages to it? Well, there are. I use a lot of mesh tape. I do a lot of drywall repairs and small drywall jobs, and the biggest advantages for that, and I'll try and explain that to you. But as far as which one is stronger and which one will resist cracks and that better, I don't really know that there is a difference if you apply it right. Now see, this one's gotten fed. I have this tool here. It's nothing too fancy, but it helps you put things on quicker if you're doing very much. It just basically lets it feed out, and there is a razor cutter here. You can kind of see it from that view too. You just pull on it and it cuts the tape. So I do a lot of repairs, and I use a fast setting joint compound. We commonly call it hot mud. And with that application, this stuff works great. And I've probably done specialized in drywall repairs for somewhere around 15 years, and I've never had a call back due to cracking in that. So it holds up really well if you do it right. But you really should put the fast setting joint compound over this because the mud itself is a lot harder, a lot more durable. And if you're trying to do a quick repair, this'll do it. And there's a couple reasons why. With the paper tape, the method is basically to put the mud on the wall, put the tape into the mud, wipe the mud down. So there's essentially 3 steps to get that on the wall, and then still not really coated. It's just embedded. You put the mud on there, the tape, and then wipe it down. And if you don't get enough mud on there, which I see happens a lot with homeowners and people who aren't experienced, you get blisters, and those blisters probably won't show until you start coating it, and then you have to cut them out and fix them, and you can have a lot of problems with that. Whereas with the mesh tape, we'll put this in the close-up. You put it on like that. In 1 step, it's on the wall. So what took you about 3 steps with this by hand, you can get essentially in 1. Now it's also ready to coat. When you put this on, you have to embed it, and then you have to let that dry, usually overnight. Then you can coat it. But with, say, doing a repair, we put this on, and I can immediately coat that. So that is probably the biggest advantage to mesh tape. I've seen some videos out there that try and determine, is this stronger? Is this stronger? Is the paper tape? Which is stronger? Well, really, the whole purpose, I think, of the tape is to basically hold the mud and keep the mud from cracking. But as far as side-to-side movement and all, if the house is going to shift and settle and it's going to crack, I don't think this is going to stop it much more than this, or vice versa. I think this is a little bit tougher because when you put hot mud on, the fast setting joint compound, it dries so fast and so hard that it's a lot more durable, and it's a lot harder to snap it and crack it. So it's just a much tougher mud, and with this reinforced into it, it just helps keep it from cracking. So especially if you're going to do some heavy coating, where say you're doing a repair and it comes out deep or something, you need to put it on thick. Hot mud will take care of that better, and in that case you really want the mesh tape because it allows you to get it done faster. So now I've also seen videos where people say, yeah, it's great, but I really have a hard time coating it, especially in angles, that my knife chatters on it, and it just is a harder, the mesh tape is a harder one to coat than the paper tape. I don't have that problem, but I've done this a long time. I'm considered one of the best in our area. I'm rated highly on Angie's List and so on. So maybe it's an experience thing. You might have a hard time with that chattering, but the problem with chattering, because of the roughness of the tape, means you're putting it on too thin. You can put it on thick enough to hide this, and probably in 1 coat. I know when I coat the angles, I only have to coat them 1 time on each side, and they're good, whether I use paper tape or mesh tape. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about this fiberfuse. Now, I actually haven't used this a whole lot, so I can't say a whole lot about it, but I think the concept sounds really cool. It's very woven fiber material. It's thin. It goes on well. The mud can soak through it. It binds into it. I think it's a really good product, but one difference is with this stuff, it is not self-adhesive. So with the mesh tape, it does have a self-adhesiveness to it. I've used this one, so it won't stick as good, but it sticks. So that's an advantage. Paper tape, same thing. There's no adhesive on this at all. It relies on the mud, so you can't pre-stick it to the wall. But as far as doing a repair, I think that because of the way this is made, it's a very strong joint tape and it should work really well. I've used it a few times. I like it. It just doesn't have the speed that mesh tape does. So let me demonstrate how these are each applied if we were, say, doing a repair here. But now let's just imagine we're going to put this tape on. So here is crack number 1, and let's say we're just going to do the mesh tape here and the paper tape here. So let me show you how the application goes, and then the coating. And in this case, I'm going to use an 8-inch wide joint tape. You can use a 6 or an 8, whatever feels good to you. To do this, you have to put a nice layer of mud on. You want to get it plenty thick. Then you take your joint tape, and let's say we don't need that much. So you put that on there, and then you have to wipe it down. And when it's this short, I usually end up holding it because it does want to slide. If you saw there, it's in wet mud. You can slide this around, which is kind of another disadvantage on the small stuff. So we wipe it down. Now we have to let that dry, come back the next day and coat it. Now let's say we're doing mesh tape. Okay, with mesh tape, we got a crack right here. So we pull this out, and now we'll go ahead and make it that long. It's stuck in one step. Now we can actually come back and coat it. So instead of waiting to day 2, we can turn around and coat it. Normally I would use the fast setting joint compound, and they have stuff that sets up in 5 minutes, 20 minutes, and 45. And the quicker it sets up, the less it shrinks also. This is going to shrink some overnight, but it's still not going to be as far as this one, because right now we can take and put a coat of mud on this. Let's actually coat it a little wider, like we're doing a nice coat. Feather it out. And that quick, I've got that coated, and it's not really that thick. I can wipe, if I want, I can wipe it down a little bit more and get that mesh tape to just start showing through right there and right there. And that would be a little bit too thin. If I'm going to coat this, I generally go for the full coat and that quick. So you see, in basically 2 steps all at the same time on the same day, we got this taped and a first coat on it. And so if this was 5-minute mud, I could literally come back in about 10 minutes and put a second coat on it. And if it's deep enough, I'd put another 5-minute coat on it, and then I'd come back and I'd put a final coat with this regular all-purpose lightweight joint compound. And there's a difference in all the joint compounds, such as the all-purpose. There's actually a difference in the all-purpose and the all-purpose lightweight. And look for a video on that coming up soon. You can be sure and subscribe and be notified of that too. But you see here how quickly you can get a small job done. So I'm going to do a video coming up on how you can do a small repair like this in as little as, I might get it done in 15 to 20 minutes from start to finish. We're going to go for the quickest we can, and I'm estimating somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes. Be watching for that video too. And that one you could actually complete all the coating in 15 or 20 minutes, and then on the same day, probably in another 45 minutes, you could actually texture that. We'll show you that whole thing too. So anyway, there's your differences between the mesh tape, the paper tape, and the new one. And if you see some other tapes, I've seen some out there, they're kind of a gimmicky joint tape. I would really stay away from that. I tried one time and ended up peeling it all back off after it was dry. It was really junk. So stick with these two. Watch our other videos on how to properly coat mud, how to do small repairs. We'll show you how to use some hot mud. And subscribe using that little red button there if you're on a PC or Mac. If you're on a smartphone or a tablet, at the end of this video there'll be a clickable link. You can now click it on your smartphone and subscribe or watch our other videos. Be sure and check us out too on all the social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, all that. Facebook, look us up, say hi sometime. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them in the comment section below. And until next time, we will see you later.